Welcome to the Inspired Impact Podcast, where dedicated female professionals share how they inspire impact every day. Authentic stories, passionate commitment, lives transformed. I'm your host, Judy Carlson. Welcome to today's episode of the Inspired Impact Podcast. Today, I have such a special guest to introduce to you. She has worked in the nonprofit sector most of her career, and she's also the youngest person working in her current nonprofit. I'm so excited to introduce you to Brie Dilley, the Executive Director of SECOR Cares. Brie, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Judy. I'm excited to be here.
Yay. So we want to know your story. Tell us how you got to where you are, and you can start wherever you want to.
Yeah. So right out of college, I started working in ministry. My husband and I did youth ministry for 4 or 5 years over in the Seattle area where we're from. And after we'd been doing that for a little while, we started thinking we really needed to get some sort of theological education if we wanted to stay in ministry. And we ultimately chose Denver Seminary here in the Denver area. So that's what brought us out to Colorado. And when we moved out here, he started working at a church that is closely connected to SECOR. And I decided I was going to kind of take a pause from church ministry. And I just very randomly got connected to SECOR because of his connection to this church. We started going there and attending regularly, and I was introduced to SECOR. I kind of got hired on the spot by the executive director at the time, who before then cold called me and said, "Have you ever heard of SECOR?" And I said, "Nope." Somehow my resume made it to his desk. I still don't know how. But yeah, he called, asked if I'd ever heard of SECOR. We lived in Colorado for a couple of weeks tops, at that time. So I said, no, what is that? And he invited me in, and we talked a little bit, and he hired me that day. So I started working there. Just some backstory for those who don't know, SECOR is a nonprofit free food market here in the Southeast metro area, serving all of Douglas, Arapahoe, and Elbert counties. And the model is set up like a grocery store. So it really centers around dignity and the fact that people, when they find themselves in a place of need, dignity is oftentimes kind of the first thing that is stripped from them. They're forced to wait in long lines. They're forced to, prove really sensitive financial documentation to kind of prove how much need they have, all this sort of stuff. And SECOR's model is very different. And it really centers the folks that we serve and looks through the lens of dignity in service. So anyway, I started working at SECOR, and I was working directly with the people that we serve. So I was doing some kind of resource navigation, helping people get set up with our market, doing intake stuff, but then also connecting them with other resources in the community. I got to spend a lot of time with other organizations and figuring out what they do and how I could refer our guests there and that sort of stuff. And I just immediately fell in love. I fell so hard. I was like, man, especially, coming from the background of the church, I remember having some really clear thoughts around, this is the kind of work that we always talk about doing in our churches, but not so often are we actually doing those things. And this is the place where we actually get to do that stuff,
Yeah.
And I just, pretty quickly was like, this is it. I want to stay in this field, this nonprofit work. This is where I want to be. And I had enough people in my life, thankfully, who, were just great mentors to me, and helped me understand that if I wanted to keep doing this kind of work and stay in this field, and I wanted to kind of also grow in my career, I needed to understand the business side of things.
Mm-hmm.
In the nonprofit world, the thing we talk about the most is the programmatic side of things.
Mm.
The heartwarming things that we get to do, the incredible stories. But there's a whole other side to how this work is done, and the way nothing can be done without those business components, without fundraising, without understanding accounting and all that sort of stuff. So I left SECOR after about a year and a half, and I moved on and went to another organization, and I got involved in the fundraising side.
Oh.
And started learning, nonprofit development, working with donors. I got a really good crash course in how a nonprofit should be run,
Mm-hmm.
and fundraising best practices and philanthropy, and how all of that works. And then about 3 years ago, I got a call from somebody who I had met initially when I worked at SECOR the first time. He and his wife really took my husband and I under their wing. Just loved on us when we moved to Colorado. Had us over for dinner. We sort of became, they were like our Colorado parents or aunt and uncle or best friends, or I don't even know how to quantify or what to call our relationship. But they're just really incredible people. He was the operations director at SECOR at the time, and he called me up and he said, "Hey, would you want to come back to SECOR at some point?" And I said, "Well, who's running the show over there? What's going on?" And he had stepped into the interim role after the last executive director left. And I was like, absolutely. It was the easiest yes of my life, right? I still had such an affinity for this work and the people that we serve. And I also was like, one of my best friends is my boss now. I mean, that's pretty incredible, right?
Sure.
So I came back in the development director role, which is kind of the nonprofit lingo for the chief fundraising position at the organization. And I was in that role for about a year before his time as interim came to a close. And I threw my hat in the ring to the board to be considered for the executive director role. And I have been in that role as of this month, 2 years.
Woo!
I just hit my 2-year anniversary.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, really exciting. And kind of during that time, I moved out here to go to Denver Seminary, right? My husband and I. And obviously, took a hard left turn. But one of the incredible things about that school is that they have a program for a master's in organizational leadership. And so at some point along the way, when I realized that I wanted to stay in this work, I pivoted and changed my degree program. So
Really?
which I have to say, I use that all the time. There's so many concepts that I learned in that program that I applied to, leading us as an organization, leading our staff here, our volunteers. So, there was a plan in all of it.
Absolutely. Wow. So, you mentioned staff. So what comprises the staff at SECOR?
Yeah, we have 16 staff, about 5 folks, 6? Is it 6? 5 or 6. 5 or 6 of us are full-time.
Okay.
And the rest are part-time.
Okay.
And then we also have a volunteer workforce of, maybe 300 or so.
Wow. So is one of your staffers then in charge of the volunteers, or
yes,
how does that work?
Yeah, we have a full-time volunteer coordinator who oversees all of that. Mm-hmm.
So what are some of the things that the volunteers do? If people listening are interested in learning more, and you share some of the different roles volunteers can have.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first I'll expand a little bit on what SECOR does, and then talk about what those volunteer opportunities are, if that's all right.
Yeah.
So our flagship program, I kind of already touched on, is that free food market, that
Okay.
client choice grocery store style market. So we have volunteers who help people get checked in. We have volunteers who help people as they're going through the market, restocking the shelves. We also have volunteers who are in the warehouse as we're receiving food in the mornings and throughout the day, and they're sorting through all of that food, getting it out into the market, getting it into storage in our warehouse. So that's a great opportunity for folks who are less people.
Sure. Oh, gotcha. Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
they can kind of be back in the warehouse.
Yeah.
But then we also have two outreaches as well. So we have an outreach that's called our mobile market,
Okay.
and that is it's an outfitted beverage truck, like a Pepsi truck. So it has these bays that roll up on both sides of the truck. And the idea came a handful of years ago. SECOR started thinking about, how can we get to people who can't get to us? And
Mm.
so then this dream for a truck, a mobile market,
Mm-hmm.
um, started growing, and they pitched that idea down at Christian Brothers Automotive at their headquarters in Texas,
Oh,
and
really? Hmm.
they funded the building of the truck.
Oh,
So
wow.
so it has kind of custom racking built into it, and it takes that same client choice model that we have in our brick and mortar
Mm-hmm.
and kind of puts it on wheels. So the bays roll up, people shop all the way around the truck just like they would in our market. There's now a
Wow.
refrigeration and freezer unit on that as well. So that mobile market goes into a couple of different areas. We kind of target places like, income qualified housing, senior living facilities, and then our biggest one is college campuses. So we go out to almost all the kind of community colleges in the South metro area. Um, and so folks can come in and stock that truck before it goes out. Every time that truck goes out, it goes out with over $3,000 worth of food.
Wow.
Um, and it can serve about 200 people. So it goes out right now about once a week.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's, we're constantly stocking and restocking and unloading and reloading. So that's another volunteer opportunity. And then we also have opportunities for folks if they wanted to come and help with service on the mobile market. If they wanted to come out to Community College of Aurora and help their student population as they're shopping through, stuff like that.
Okay.
So,
Mm-hmm.
and then our third core program is called Food for Thought. And Food for Thought is, I think you said you had June on here with the Backpack Society, similar kind of program, really targeting those kids who show up to
Oh,
school. They're reliant on that free breakfast and
oh,
lunch, but then the weekend rolls around and, the cupboard is still empty.
right.
So we get those kids a bag of food to kind of cover the gap over the weekend. And that program serves 33 schools, I think, right now, over five
Wow.
school districts, totaling about 2,200 kids every single week.
Wow.
So we have volunteer shifts for folks to come in and pack those bags, as well as help us just distribute them out to some of our schools. So
Do you have like an assembly line, and do you have
yep.
specified times when people come in? And because I've done that at Backpack
hmm
Society, but
hmm
not sure how it transfers over to what you guys are doing.
Yes, yeah. It's very much an assembly line kind of thing. We have 5 shifts a week dedicated just to Food for Thought. I mean, if you think about that,
Wow.
2,250 kids means 2,250 bags every single week that need to be packed.
Wow.
So, yeah, so it takes about 5 volunteer shifts to get all of that done. And then, they're all delivered and the whole thing starts over again the following week.
So
Yeah.
do they go in bins by school? 33 schools? Are there 33 bins, one for each school, or how do you manage that?
Great question. So we don't count the bags as they go in. We have these kind of big cages that are made to go directly onto the truck. We have a truck that's especially for this program
Oh,
and a driver that's especially for this program. And
okay.
so he delivers a couple of days a week.
Okay.
And we have a route set up for him. So he has, does one route on Tuesdays, one route on Wednesdays, and then we kind of leave Thursday open in case there's a snowstorm or something and we need to shift.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so we kind of know approximately how many bags the truck can accommodate,
Okay.
and he can only do so many, per route, that sort of thing. But and then we have a couple of, our more rural schools that we have some volunteers who will go out and deliver to. We have some schools too that are, it's one or two students. A school will call us and say, hey, we got this kid. It's kind of this special circumstance. Is there any way that you can help us out? So our driver and our truck is sent to kind of the bulk of our schools, which is
Yeah.
Aurora Public Schools and then the Cherry Creek School District as well.
Wow. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So Aurora and Cherry Creek are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are our two big school districts, but we're also in Douglas, Elbert, and Elizabeth.
Okay. Hmm. Wow. Um, let's see, what else would be helpful information to share about your organization, where it's headed in the future, new programs you might be interested in, growth potential, all of that kind of stuff, because it seems like it's growing.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the need is certainly growing.
Right. Well, I guess
um,
that's the key, right? The
yeah,
need is
yeah,
growing, then
yeah,
how do you
yeah,
accommodate that? And
yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, you did mention when we were just chatting before, there's aging people that are, coming for services, and that population is growing.
Yeah, definitely. So, well, first off, I'll say next year, 2026 is going to be our 20th anniversary as an organization.
Wow.
Really, really exciting for us.
Yeah.
The last handful of years, we've had a lot of transition in our leadership and in our board, and we've had to do a lot to kind of grow up quickly. I'll say as an organization,
Mm-hmm.
really really getting all of those kind of nonprofit best practices in order. That was
Mm-hmm.
a kind of a big part of what we took on, what I took on when I stepped into this role.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we started SECOR, like many nonprofits, in a church closet, and and then we've just kind of seen this exponential growth, especially over the last decade, but more specifically in that kind of pandemic to post-pandemic
Oh,
era.
yeah.
Um, our annual operating budget doubled in just a
Oh,
couple of years.
wow.
And so we just saw this kind of exponential growth, and we needed to kind of take a beat to catch up and get
Okay.
all of our
Mm-hmm.
get all of our ducks in a row
Right.
and all of that sort of stuff. So coming up on this 20th anniversary it feels like a massive celebration for us. We're really excited, and I feel like we're really positioned well as an organization for that kind of growth that you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that, the last 2 or 3 years, a lot of our focus has been on this migrant crisis that's hit the Denver metro area. We have 26 languages that are spoken at SECOR. And
Wow.
yeah, and we've always had paper, we've always had all of our documentation in Spanish, and we have Spanish speakers here. But our third most spoken, our languages go English, Spanish. Our third most spoken language is Russian. Our fourth
Wow.
most spoken language is Ukrainian. And it's not easy to find speakers of those languages. And
Wow.
so, and like I said, 26 languages in total. So we had to do a lot to start figuring out quickly, how do we communicate with people? Um, more so than just pointing at stuff,
Oh,
right?
wow.
The whole organization is centered around this idea of dignity, and we want to give
Yeah.
people dignity regardless of what language they speak.
Mm-hmm.
So we had to really get creative. We, did a lot of learning to kind of figure that out. We realized really, really quickly that Google Translate is an insufficient translation device. We have a lot of folks coming from the Middle East that, I'd said those top four languages. Number five is kind of a three-way tie between some of the Middle Eastern languages like Pashto and Dari, and that sort of stuff. I'm probably saying these languages wrong. but, um, but one of the things that we started realizing was we had some folks coming from the Middle East. Generally, it was the women who were coming into shop, And a lot of those women didn't, their education stopped at, let's say,
Oh,
second or third grade. So
wow.
even though we could get things translated into their written language, if they can't read their own language, then it doesn't matter.
Right.
And tools like Google Translate for some of those languages, they only have the written component. They don't have the auditory component.
Oh,
Not
wow.
all of the languages do they have that auditory component. So we had to figure
Okay.
out some translation devices that would have both, you know,
Okay.
in every
Wow.
language. So
Sure.
that was kind of like our big challenge, getting all sorts of stuff translated and signage and all that sort of stuff. I'd say we're mostly through the woods on that. We've kind
Hmm.
of, I'm not gonna say we got it figured out, but we've done the best that we could, and
Yeah.
we're no longer kind of in crisis
Hmm.
crisis levels on that. Now we're sort of shifting our focus over to our aging population, like you were saying,
Mm.
that we know being here in Douglas County, um, our population is aging rapidly, and we really want to start thinking about how we can kind of rise to the occasion.
Yeah.
So this last year we launched senior shopping hours
Mm.
as one of our attempts at that. Our market is open to the general public Wednesday through Saturday, but on Tuesdays we're open for what we call senior hours.
Mm.
And how our market typically works is we have 12 appointments every half an hour.
Okay.
So people kind of crank through. It can get a little busy, a little crazy, and then we also have volunteer stocking and stuff like that.
Sure.
During senior hours, we run at half capacity, so it's only 6 appointments every half an hour, and it's done. That's done very intentionally. The goal is to have a quieter, slower paced shopping experience. We have people who have mobility issues, they
Yeah.
have a physical impairment, and then we also have some folks who aren't an older adult, but they have a TBI, or some veterans with PTSD, or for whatever reason really benefit from that kind of
Right.
slower,
Sure.
quieter shopping experience. So
Yeah.
that's one of the things that we launched in the last year. It's almost everyone's favorite day here at SECOR
I
is
bet.
Tuesdays.
Yeah.
It's so fun. You get a lot of the same folks coming through.
Right.
The volunteers get to fight over who gets those shifts, because it's just they love our seniors, and
Uh-huh.
it's a really fun time. So that's been a really cool kind of initiative, and
Yeah.
attempt for us to just try and figure out some creative solutions for those
Right.
populations.
Right.
We're currently piloting a program that we're going to call SECOR at Your Door, which is like a delivery service for
Okay.
some groceries.
Yeah.
I don't know that that's going to ever be a huge program, just because it's really logistically challenging.
Right.
And our service area is 56 zip codes, Douglas, Arapahoe, Elbert counties. It's 3,500 square miles. There's just no way that we could, deliver to everybody who needs us, across all three of those counties, unfortunately. But we're trying it out, just kind of seeing how it goes, and sort of seeing, what we can learn from it. Our high level kind of organizational strategy is typically, we don't ever want to duplicate a resource.
Right.
It's not
Hmm.
wise stewardship of
Right.
the funds that our donors give to us,
Hmm.
nor is it good stewardship of our own time and
Yeah.
energy.
Right.
So we're really big on building collaborative partnerships with
Hmm.
other agencies in the area. And
Hmm.
if there's someone out there who's doing, they're meeting a need, they have their niche, we would much rather have a robust relationship with them, where we can do a warm handoff and good
Right.
referral for one of our
Hmm.
guests, than just recreating that program
Right.
on our own.
That's
I mean,
hmm.
like, this in business, right? You can't do all things well.
Right.
You have to do a few
Exactly.
things.
That's
So,
right.
yeah. So, but we also allow that work. We spend a lot of time out in the community. We get agencies in Douglas County together every 6 weeks or so, and just kind of talk
Wow.
through what everybody's experiencing. So, highly, highly collaborative.
Right.
Um, but that also helps to illuminate where the gaps are.
Ah.
Like,
Hmm.
what are the needs that aren't being met?
Hmm.
Or, for us, sometimes there's an organization who maybe they're doing that in Douglas County, but they only serve Douglas County.
Mm.
And so our Arapahoe County folks are left out, or vice versa,
Mm.
or,
Hmm.
whatever.
Sure.
So we kind of use that to help us
Mm-hmm.
understand where the gaps are in service,
Mm-hmm.
and then kind of find our way to step into those. So one of the
Mm-hmm.
things that we launched this last year in that vein is a digital literacy class.
Oh,
We switched over to an appointment system about 2 years ago when the
okay.
need, shot up,
Yep.
and we had a line wrapped around the building at the beginning of the day.
See.
And, it
Yeah.
was crazy, but
Right.
we felt like, hey, that's not dignifying.
Right.
You don't have to wait outside for an hour to go grocery shopping. Why should these folks? So,
Right.
so we moved to an appointment system to make things more efficient. But in doing so, that really highlighted the digital literacy gap for a
Mm,
lot of the folks that we're serving, especially
interesting.
our older folks, people who English is not their first language.
Mm-hmm.
And we are incredibly blessed that our program manager, Debbie, is a former teacher, technology teacher. And
Wow.
so we have a program now where we have a volunteer who refurbishes laptops. So if
Oh.
anybody out there listening has a laptop that's sitting around collecting dust, or even better, if your company is doing an IT overhaul and you're
Oh.
you're getting rid of all of your devices, we will take them.
Wow.
So we have a volunteer that refurbishes computers, and then Debbie does a class where folks can go through. They hit a couple. I think they have to pass 4 of 6 modules or something like that, and once they complete the class, they get to take the device home and
Oh,
keep it.
wow. That's so cool.
Yeah, and it's just been so awesome. We've had stories of people who, we have a guest who works up at the airport at DIA, and he was working outside, schlepping bags, hurting his back, and he just wanted a job inside,
Wow.
but he didn't know how to use a computer. So he
Wow.
took the class, he attached the certificate he got when he
Oh.
submitted his application, and he got a new job, and he's indoors, and he came in so
Oh.
excited and wanted to share that with us. But that's not a huge leap in terms of moving the needle of self-sufficiency, but in quality of life,
Right.
right?
Right.
Similarly, we have some seniors who now, because they know how to use a computer, they can communicate with their grandkids on the
Right.
other side of the world. And,
Wow.
so some really awesome things have come out of that program. But that's just one of those things that we started kind of seeing a need and
Mm-hmm.
seeing that no one else was really stepping into this space. So,
Mm-hmm.
okay, let's figure out how to do it.
Yeah.
Um, I think next on the horizon, we're looking at some financial literacy classes, some ESL classes, those
Mm-hmm.
sorts of things.
Mm-hmm.
But we really try to hold things loosely. We try to let our guests help us decide where we should go next.
Mm-hmm.
We have a guest advisory board who, they serve in as like an advisory council to us to help
Mm-hmm.
us steer the
Sure.
organizations, where we're going to go next, and help us make those strategic decisions. And we just try stuff and see how it goes,
That's
and
great. Wow.
see what's successful, and we learn and we grow and we evolve, and yeah, and we just keep trying. So I don't know what the next 20 years at SECOR are going to look like, but I do feel confident that no matter what the need is, we're gonna rise to meet it.
Yeah, man, your feelers are just going further and further out in all the different areas. It's great. I love to
Yeah.
hear that. How did the name come about?
Yeah, so like I said, we started out of a church. We started out of Southeast Christian Church here in Parker.
Uh-huh.
The founder of SECOR is actually the adopted daughter of the founding pastor of that church. So she, along with some other folks in her community, started realizing that, yes, even in an affluent place like Douglas County, there are people who are struggling. And so they rallied around Christmas time. They got some toys and food for some families who were struggling. And then, one thing led to another. As they say, SECOR became an official outreach of the church.
Mm.
And so the name stands for Southeast Community Outreach. So it was the outreach arm of the church. It was an official ministry of the church. And then in 2006, we became our own independent 501c3.
Okay. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Always interesting uh to hear all the backstory about names and stuff. That's
Oh,
great.
totally, totally. And we still have people who but we just had an open house event a couple months ago, and we had founding board members, who wanted to come in and see it. And
That's
they
amazing.
hadn't seen our new space. We've been in the building that we're in now since 2019.
Okay.
And yeah, so there's still so many people who were around in
Yeah,
those very early days, which is
absolutely.
really fun. Our founder unfortunately died young,
Oh,
but a lot of the other folks who came around her and helped her get this thing off the ground are still here
and they'll
and
be at
still
your 20th anniversary
they
celebration next year.
absolutely will. They still give generously and are still involved. And to me, that's one of the things that's really beautiful about SECOR is that we were really born out of the community,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
our support, all of those, all the donations is almost exclusively from the community. We're
Wow.
very much by the community, for the community. And some of the guests that we help come back around, and they become donors and
Hmm.
supporters and
Hmm.
volunteers. And I'm in
Hmm.
fact, um, you and I got connected through the 100 Women Who Care Douglas County Giving Circle.
Right.
And I was sharing with you before we started recording that there was a woman in that group who, and when I was touring everybody around, she spoke up and said, "Hey, I was one of these people,
I was a
and now
guest.
she gets to be on the other side of it." So,
Wow.
I mean, we have staff that used to be guests, and so yeah, it's a really cool community centric
Right.
organization.
Yeah, so fulfilling for sure. So you mentioned
Definitely.
the donations. Tell me about a little bit more about the donations, and then we'll kind of wrap up here. But if someone's interested in getting more involved from that standpoint.
Yeah, yeah. We accept all donations in any form.
Okay.
We'll take food. People do food drives for us all the time. We're
Okay.
connected with an app called Fresh Food Connect that connects community gardeners with food pantries in their area. So we have people stopping by that way. But then, of course, we run largely on financial support.
Okay.
Um,
Hmm.
and so people can go onto our website, secorcares.com, and, you can give directly there. We'll take, one-time donations. We have a lot of monthly givers, but we can also do, gifts of stock and
Hmm.
things like that.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
And then the financial donations sometimes must need to turn into purchasing food if there's not enough food
Oh,
donation.
absolutely. Yeah, we
Okay.
have to purchase a lot of our food. Um, we get a lot donated from our local grocery stores, Food Bank of the Rockies, some of those places, but we just serve, frankly, way too many people
Mm.
to sustain ourselves on donated food alone. Our three core programs, Food for Thought, the mobile market, and our free food pantry, our free food market, right now, in combination, we touch the lives of over 3,000 families in a given week.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's just an insane amount of food
Oh my
that we go
gosh.
through. So we do have to purchase a lot of food just to keep the shelves stocked, and keep folks fed. So I would also extend to your listeners, if
Yeah.
anybody ever wants to come in for a tour,
Okay.
I love to say that SECOR is best seen. Sometimes it's hard to conceptualize when I talk so much about dignity and why that's important to us. That's kind of a hard thing to understand until you see that space, until you
Really.
walk in and go, oh yeah, this looks like a grocery store. Our
Wow.
our goal is, for moms who are bringing their kids in, that those kids have no idea
Oh,
that they're at a
wow.
food pantry, and
Wow.
we want everybody who walks in the door to be greeted with a smile, to be welcomed, and no shame, no stigma, no
Mm.
judgment. I mean, we're really big on, life happens, things are hard.
Mhm.
No one, when they were a little kid said, when I grow up, I want to be shopping in a food pantry. Like that just
Right.
doesn't happen,
Right.
when
Yeah.
And especially in an affluent place like Douglas County, there's
Right.
so much shame, there's so much stigma. I can't
Mm-hmm.
tell you the number of times that people are like, I can't believe I'm here.
Yeah.
You know, I talked to a guest recently who was like, I used to volunteer at places like this.
Yeah.
And so that's another message that I can't
Mm-hmm.
ever overemphasize
Mm-hmm.
is when we talk about places like SECOR, we use this term suburban poverty a lot
Mm-hmm.
here because when people think of poverty, they often think of, that like some sort of quintessential image of like a homeless person on a
Right.
bench or something like
Right.
that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Significant addiction or mental illness or tent cities or, whatever kind
Right.
of things you see in these urban areas.
Right.
That's not that's not who we're serving. I mean, it's we don't not serve those people. We get some of that for sure, but the overwhelming majority of people that we serve are your neighbors.
Mm-hmm.
They are the people like you and me
Yeah.
who just had no idea that life was going to go the way that it did.
Right.
And I there's a HOA neighborhood across the street from SECOR, and in that same neighborhood we have donors, we have volunteers, and we have guests, and they all live right next to each other, and none of them know the other exists.
That's
I mean, to
amazing.
me, that's suburban poverty.
That
It's
is.
it's the people that you just didn't expect,
Right.
you never envisioned at a food pantry. So that's why to us that dignity component is so important,
Right.
because we know that when you walk in the door, it's it has taken every ounce of courage and bravery that you
Mm-hmm.
have to
Yeah.
admit that you needed help and to walk in the door. And so we want to be a place that welcomes you, that doesn't put any more barriers in your way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's that's what I mean when I say dignity. So I would love to extend an invitation
Yeah.
for anyone to come in and see our facility and get a better understanding of the work that we do and how
Mhm.
that works.
Yeah. That's beautiful. Just beautiful. That makes a huge difference for sure. Yeah. Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you.
Thank
Yeah.
you, Judy.
Yeah, it's been good. Just what you were sharing there just brings up some memories of the three of us and some of the days that we were dependent on free stores. And I always tell a funny story about going with my son, who is, I don't know, 6'2" or 6'3", and he's a big guy, and he was only 14 or 15 at the time, but he would push the grocery cart, and um, it's very intimidating to not know that you go to the fresh and then you go to the canned goods and then you go to the
Mm-hmm.
meats and that stuff. But everybody there is super, super friendly and helpful and embracing us, just. And the funniest thing is I love taking him, and I didn't have anything to do with this, but the person that's taking a pizza in the box, frozen pizza or whatever, off the shelf and handing it to us or putting it in the cart, looks up at him and looks at me and looks up at him and grabs a couple more pizzas. Says, I think you guys are going to need more than just one pizza.
Oh my
Oh,
gosh, that's
yeah. Or
so
one
funny.
time we were there, they said, I think I might have something in the back for you. And they came out with a ham and put it in our cart.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
I mean, just because I guess he was 6'2" and a big kid and knew he was a teenager and had a big appetite. I don't know, but
Yeah. But it's those little things,
it
right?
is.
That just when you're in that place
Hmm.
where you are, stitching together jobs and
Right,
you're in the chaos of that.
right,
And to have a place where even if it's just for a couple of moments, you feel like
right,
you can breathe a little
right.
bit, you can laugh, just
Yeah,
and feel human again,
right. Yeah.
We one of the things that we always have in our market that we're incredibly blessed to have because of our relationship with Trader Joe's, we almost always have flowers.
Oh,
And
wow.
I tell people this is not about do you have enough calories to
Right. That's
survive. You
beautiful.
know,
Oh my
this is
gosh.
this is what can we give you that just makes you feel human,
Special. Yeah, and
that just makes you
special.
feel special, that
Yeah.
like can we can we not only make sure that you have enough food to feed your family, but can we go beyond that
Yeah.
and just give you some creature comforts back?
Right.
All of those things that you've now had to cut out of your budget,
Yeah. Right.
those feel good kinds of things.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Flowers for most women in a vase on the counter make you feel very special. No
Yeah.
special occasion, just something
Hmm.
nice in the home. That's
It is,
beautiful. I love that.
it's one of the things we get the most
Yeah, I bet.
feedback about.
I bet. That's great.
Hmm.
Wow. Well, this has been a delightful conversation. Thank you so much for sharing so much. I'm excited for what's ahead for your organization, and you at the helm are fabulous director. So thanks
Thank
for
you, Judy.
taking the time to share it all with us today, and encourage people to check it out, visit, volunteer, help out in some way.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for having me and giving me a platform to share about the coolest job in the entire world that I
That's
have.
right. You got it, girl. You got it. All right. Thank you. Thanks so much for joining us for the Inspired Impact podcast. To listen to past episodes, please visit theinspiredimpactpodcast.com.